Picture this. 1944, Britain in the thick of World War II,
Oh, yeah.
and a woman is on trial for witchcraft. Not Salem, not the 1600s.
Right.
This is Helen Duncan's story. It might just make you rethink the 20th century, you know?
Yeah, it really pulls you in. And it's not just the supernatural, the ghosts and the seances and all that.
Right.
It's about a society dealing with loss
Mm.
and looking for comfort, like where's the line between what's real and what's not. We're going deep into all that today, history, the paranormal, and that human need to connect with, something bigger,
Yeah.
our guide. An episode from the podcast Betwixt the Sheets called The Last Witch Trial.
And we've got historian Kate Lister. She's all about sex, scandal, and society, which is interesting.
It is, and she's talking with Jess Martin. He manages Bodmin Jail, a place with its own spooky history of witchcraft accusations.
Oh, wow.
What gets me is how they connect Helen Duncan's story to the bigger picture. Did you know that after World War I, there was this huge surge in people being interested in spiritualism?
Well, yeah, after a war, so many families lost loved ones.
Right.
People would cling to anything that offered, I don't know, like a connection or a little bit of hope.
Right.
Right.
But it wasn't just grief.
Okay.
Think about it. This was also the time of the telegram and Morse code, these new ways to communicate.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
It made people wonder, could we talk to the dead? Maybe these mediums could bridge that gap.
Fascinating. So that's where Helen Duncan comes in. They describe her seances as these, like, theatrical events in dark rooms.
Oh, yeah?
She'd channel spirits from a cabinet, and there was even ectoplasm.
The ectoplasm. That was supposedly like a physical sign of spiritual energy,
Right.
but it turns out it was way less mystical than everyone thought.
What do you mean?
It wasn't real. She made it. From everyday stuff,
No way.
cheesecloth, muslin, even egg whites. And she'd swallow yards of it,
Real.
only to, bring it back up during the seance.
Oh, wow. That's
crazy, right? But it shows how much people wanted to believe.
Yeah.
They longed to talk to their loved ones, and Helen knew how to, use that.
But how did she fool so many people for so long? Didn't anyone suspect anything?
Oh, of course there were skeptics.
Okay.
The episode mentions this photographer, Harvey Metcalf. He went to some of her seances back in 28 and took pictures.
I've got to see those.
You can find them online, and the ectoplasm looks like, I don't know, something you'd buy for Halloween.
You're kidding. It's hard to believe anyone fell for that.
It was a different time. Spiritualism was huge.
Yeah.
People saw what they wanted to see. But by 1931, some of her ectoplasm was tested. It was
Ah.
just household stuff. And then there's Harry Price. He was this famous ghost hunter.
I've heard of them.
He wanted to expose Helen.
Oh, really?
He offered her money to do seances, but in a controlled setting.
Okay.
He even suggested she get an x-ray before one session, to prove she wasn't hiding anything.
Wow. Bold move.
Well, let's just say she wasn't thrilled. She ran out into the street, ranting about the x-ray.
Can you imagine?
It's kind of funny now, but I bet Harry Price wasn't laughing at the time.
Yeah, probably not. So even after being exposed, she kept going.
Oh, she did.
Wow.
And that's where things get really interesting. Her story gets tied up with national security during the war, with this whole HMS Barham thing.
Right, the HMS Barham. This is where it gets, I don't know, mysterious. So she claims to contact a dead sailor from this British battleship, right?
Yeah,
But the ship sank in 41, and the government kept it a secret
exactly.
to keep morale up.
And so the enemy wouldn't know.
So how did Helen know?
Right. Did she somehow get secret information? Or was there something, more to her? The episode talks about both possibilities. It's like a wartime mystery.
Mhm.
And this is ultimately what got her arrested.
But they didn't just arrest her for fraud or, leaking secrets.
No.
They charged her under the Witchcraft Act of 1735.
It makes you wonder, doesn't it? Why use a law from 1735 in the middle of World War II?
I know, right? Were they trying to make an example of her? Maybe to discredit spiritualism when everyone was already on edge?
Maybe. Or was it a way to silence her about the HMS Barham without admitting they messed up?
I hadn't thought about that. It feels like this trial was more about controlling what people thought than about what Helen actually did.
It does, doesn't it? But to really get why this charge is so important, we have to understand the Witchcraft Act of 1735 itself. It really changed how people thought about witchcraft.
Oh, how so?
Well, before that, people actually believed witches had real powers, like they could harm you with magic.
Right.
But the 1735 Act was different. It wasn't about punishing actual magic. It was about punishing people who pretended to have magic.
Oh, I see.
So fake mediums, fortune tellers, anyone who used people's beliefs to make money.
Okay.
It was all about protecting people from being tricked, not from like supernatural threats.
So by using this act, they were basically saying Helen was a con artist, not a real witch.
If
But wouldn't it have been easier to just deal with, the possible security breach head on?
It might seem that way, but the podcast suggests that using the Witchcraft Act let them avoid admitting that maybe Helen really did have secret info.
Oh, okay.
It was a way to control the story and make her look bad without telling the truth about the HMS Barham.
Sneaky.
Pretty clever, though, if you think about it. And this trial, it was a huge media event.
Really?
7 days of testimony, people packed into the courtroom.
Wow.
It was a big deal. Some thought Helen was the real deal, others thought she was a fake. Opinions were all over the place.
So what was her defense? Did she ever admit to, faking it?
Nope, she said she was innocent the whole time.
Hmm.
And you know what? A lot of people supported her.
Oh, really?
They said she really did help them talk to loved ones and that she gave them comfort when they were grieving.
Wow. So it was like a battle of beliefs in the courtroom.
It was. You had the believers and the skeptics and all this happening during a war.
Right, when everyone was already stressed and scared.
Exactly. What stands out to you about this part? What do you think? Guilty or innocent? We'll talk more about the trial and what happened after, but let's take a break for now.
It really is wild how this trial, showed just how divided people were about Helen Duncan and spiritualism.
Yeah, it's like everyone had an opinion.
Right, and for some people, she was like a symbol of hope.
Oh, yeah, that part about the packed courtroom, all those people who believed in her powers, that really stuck with me.
Yeah, they said she helped them connect with their loved ones, brought them comfort.
Like, imagine losing someone in the war, and then someone comes along saying they can help you talk to them.
Right. It'd be hard not to, grasp at that hope.
Absolutely. But the episode also makes it clear that, not everyone bought it.
Of course, some saw her as a fake, taking advantage of people.
Yeah, especially with those photos of her fake ectoplasm going around.
Right. It's hard to deny that evidence.
Yeah.
But even after they found her guilty, the debate didn't stop.
Yeah, some people thought the whole trials was a sham, like the government was attacking spiritualism itself.
Oh, interesting.
Or maybe even covering up their own mistakes with the HMS Barham.
It's almost like her story became this lightning rod for like all these anxieties people had during the war.
Definitely fear, grief, distrust of the government.
And it brought up ethical questions too, right?
Oh, yeah. Was she intentionally exploiting people? Or did she actually believe she was helping them?
It's tough to say.
It really makes you think.
It does, and it makes you wonder what effect it had on spiritualism as a whole.
I mean, did people stop believing in mediums after she was exposed?
Maybe some did. They probably became more skeptical. But for others, it might have had the opposite effect.
What do you mean?
It fed into those conspiracy theories that the government was hiding something, suppressing the truth.
It's like the same event can mean totally different things to different people.
Exactly, depending on what they already believe. And then there's the whole thing about her legacy, people trying to clear her name. Oh, right, the podcast mentioned that.
Some of her descendants are still fighting to have her conviction overturned.
They think she was unfairly targeted.
Yeah, they say the Witchcraft Act shouldn't have been used against her.
It does seem like an odd choice, considering it was meant for fraudulent mediums, not people who might have actually gotten their hands on secret info.
Right, and they argue that she was just a victim of circumstance, caught up in the chaos of the war.
Plus, they got rid of that Witchcraft Act a few years later, right?
Yeah, in 51, they replaced it with the Fraudulent Mediums Act, which was specifically about, tricking people.
So maybe if she'd been tried under that law, things would have been different.
It's possible. But even with that change, people still argue about her legacy.
It makes sense. There are so many sides to her story.
Right. Some see her as a symbol of fighting back against authority, of standing up for your beliefs.
And others see her as a warning to be careful of people who take advantage of others.
It shows how history is never simple. There's always more to the story.
It is fascinating how even with the proof that she was faking some stuff, there's still that part of us that wants to believe there might be something more.
It's like we want to believe in the mystery, in the possibility of life after death.
It's a powerful thing, that hope.
It is. And then there's the HMS Barham thing.
Yeah.
If she was making everything else up, how did she know about that? It's a question that keeps coming up.
I know, right?
Oh.
Was it just a lucky guess? Did someone tell her? Or was it something, more intuitive? It's like the episode leaves us hanging.
And that makes it even more interesting, right? It makes us think critically about what we believe.
It shows how blurry the line can be between truth and lies, between belief and skepticism.
Exactly. And maybe that's the biggest lesson here, that history isn't just about facts and dates. It's about the stories we tell ourselves, the questions we ask.
And Helen Duncan's story, with all the mystery and the drama and the emotions, it definitely keeps us asking questions.
We've talked about a lot, the war, the ethical stuff, the mystery of it all.
Yeah, it's been a wild ride.
It has. But we're not done yet. There's still more to unpack, more to discuss about Helen Duncan and what her story tells us about ourselves.
Helen Duncan's story really stays with you, you know. The more we dig into it, the more complicated it gets.
It does make you think, doesn't it? Looking back now, it seems crazy to have a witch trial in the 1940s.
Right.
But when you think about what was going on, the war, people scared and grieving, it makes sense why they reacted the way they did to Helen Duncan.
It shows how much, our own beliefs and the time we live in shape how we see things.
For sure, we all have our biases, right?
Mhm.
And that's part of why this case is so interesting. It's like a reflection of, human nature, our need to believe, our fear of what we don't understand.
And even though we know she faked some things, there's still that question about the HMS Barham.
Oh, yeah, that one's hard to explain away.
If everything else was a trick, how did she know about that sinking? It's like the one thing that makes you wonder if there was something, more to her.
People have all sorts of theories. Maybe she had a secret informant or picked up on gossip without realizing it.
Right.
Or maybe she really did have some kind of intuition, something we can't explain scientifically.
That's what's so great about the episode. They don't give us a definitive answer. It keeps the mystery alive.
Exactly. It makes us question things, And maybe that's a good thing.
Yeah.
It reminds us to stay curious, to be open to the possibility that we don't know everything.
To be okay with not having all the answers.
Exactly. Helen Duncan's story, it's a reminder that history isn't just black and white. It's messy and full of, unanswered questions.
And I think that's what makes it so fascinating. It's not just about Helen Duncan, it's about us, about how we make sense of the world.
We've talked about so much, the war, the ethical stuff, the mystery of it all.
It's been quite a deep dive.
It has, but it comes down to this. What do you believe? Was she a con artist? Or did she genuinely think she could talk to spirits? Or maybe a bit of both?
It's a tough question, and I think that's what makes this story so compelling. It makes you think. And, you might even change your mind depending on what evidence you focus on.
Exactly. If you were on that jury back in 44, what would you have decided? It's a question worth asking ourselves, not just about Helen Duncan, but about how we form our own beliefs.
That's a great point. Well, I think we've reached the end of our deep dive into the life and trial of Helen Duncan, the last woman convicted under the Witchcraft Act in England.
It's been a fascinating journey, hasn't it?
It has. But the conversation doesn't have to end here. We encourage you to keep exploring this case, to look for different perspectives, and to come to your own conclusions.
There's always more to learn, right?
Always. Thanks for joining us on this journey of discovery. Until next time, keep questioning, keep learning, and keep diving deep.